everyone. Here we are again with another one of our uh, interviews for the Million Dollar Social Machine. And we have with us today Brent all the way from Australia. So this should be quite interesting. He does social media consulting in Australia and works with mainly with business-to-business brands, helping them to build their social network and with LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook. So he'll give you some good tips on that. So welcome, Brent. We're glad to have you here today. And you might want to tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got into social media.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Anna, and hello, everyone. Well, just a background about me. Basically, I've got a long career in marketing. I started off in marketing on the old traditional channels when I was back in advertising, like using mail and television and things like that. And of course, because of the evolution of the internet and then Google having a presence on the internet and then email making its presence felt, slowly but surely with the companies that I was working with, we actually started to use digital channels because of course we were able to be a lot more targeted because we could move away from mass media to really tailored sort of programs where we could try to aim for the people that we were really after. And as a natural evolution, of course, social media came onto the scene and everyone expected social media just to be social media. And then someone finally realized at some point that, well, you know, in business to business or wherever you are, it's people who actually do business with other people. And inherently human beings are social. And they found that you could actually also be social and be doing business on social media networks. And I suppose that's why LinkedIn started to take off, because I think LinkedIn was launched in 2003, but most people were just putting their resumes up on the site. So what I found is that I was working for companies sometimes I was actually working for agencies, so I worked for a mix of company clients, and we found that using social media was just a natural extension of who they really were, and it was progression from the old channels. And I was consulting for what was the first social selling agency in the Asia Pacific region for a couple of years and finally struck out on my own earlier this year. So yeah, it's been really good.
Wow. Well, in looking at that, and especially, you know, just striking out on your own and so forth, what's the one thing that you wish you had done differently maybe when you started out on your own than that would have maybe caused you a whole lot less stress and maybe saved you some time and money?
Well, definitely with the stress part, I would say that nothing's ever a done deal until it's a done deal. So you know the old expression how it's not over till it's over. What I mean by that is that you're going through nurturing relationships on social media. You have prospective clients or former clients who say, yes, I'm definitely going to do that. And you kind of assume that it's in the bag and we're going to sign this client and this month we're going to have this amount of work and this much revenue coming in. And then at the last minute, some of them may get let go because they're cutting costs in the company, or they leave the company, or there's a change of direction. And all of a sudden you think, well, I don't have as much work as I thought I had. So the thing I'd say is that I should never ever assume that it's in the bag until it's actually started with the program. So what I was doing at the start is that working with a few prospective clients, thinking that I was going to have a really high conversion rate, but I probably needed to work with a larger group of clients, assuming that a certain percentage, of course, will drop off and some will sign up and some will really delay until the next year. So that would save me a lot of stress if I just been mindful of that. I really needed to expand my network a bit more. That's what I'd say about that.
That's very good advice. I think a lot of times when we're starting out on our own, when we think that we have something in the bag and it falls through, it's hard to not take it personal, you know, and people say it's business, not personal, but, you know, when it's you on your own, it's kind of hard to not take it personal. So it's good to hear you say that and tell people to be mindful of that. Now, what social platform do you use mainly to grow your business?
I mainly use LinkedIn because I'm in the business-to-business field and all my clients are actually business-to-business. And despite the fact that LinkedIn, I suppose in terms of members, if you look at it compared to Facebook, it's small. But then again, you look at quite a few countries and their populations are small compared to Facebook. So LinkedIn, last I heard in August, was at 450 million members. I've since heard they're at 480 million now, but I haven't had that verified. So the reason I use that is because that's still the largest business-to-business network, but I do use Twitter for support, and Facebook can be good for business-to-business because of the sheer numbers. But you just have to be careful in its use because, of course, as you know, most people go onto Facebook not for business reasons, but for other reasons to share a picture of their meal or
Oh, yeah, their cat.
yeah. Yeah. So that's the one I use the most.
And lately, I have been inundated with friend requests from people that are just ghosting some of my friends' names.
Oh.
I mean, I actually today got a request from someone that recently died. I'm like, oh, come on. I know that person didn't request to be my friend, So, but Facebook like you said, and everybody knows Facebook and likes it. So that's what I find to be true with that also. And like you said, but for business to business, I think that the LinkedIn is a better platform for that sort of thing. So what are some different ways that you've been able to use LinkedIn? I mean, tell us some of the techniques you've used in building your business. That's what I'm trying to say.
Sure. Well, sometimes what we do on LinkedIn is called social selling. Sometimes it's called first degree social selling because it's about, well, first of all, the irony is it's not about selling at all. It's really about building your brand and creating demand. But we call it first degree because you nurture the relationship with someone who's a first degree connection to you. So basically, I've simplified it and it's just 5 steps. So the LinkedIn profile is the start of really your presence on LinkedIn because that's what everyone encounters. If you have a best practice profile, what happens is that people can actually come to your profile and get an understanding of who you are, like what you look like, your headline, your summary will tell them a bit about you. You might have some rich media, hopefully, some videos, podcasts, whatever the case may be. Or you might even have like white papers and case studies because those two things still do quite well in B2B. So you can really get to know someone quite well. And the second step would be to actually search for your prospects. So I mentioned before, there are 450 million members on LinkedIn, but not everyone's active. They estimate that about a quarter of the membership log in every month. So what you need to do is to work out the job titles of the sort of prospects that you are after, and you do a search for them using a Boolean search. So some people know how to use a Boolean search, and all that means is that you put the keywords in either brackets or quotation marks. And what that means is that you can get a really high quality list of people who might be really good prospects. So once you got that list happening, then you can just work out, say, yes, no, yes, yes, no, and look at the people who you really want to connect with. And that's the third step. You just invite them to connect and you do it properly. Some people on LinkedIn still do the default invitation, which is I'd like to join your network. It's really quite lazy. It's not best practice. So if you actually send an invitation to connect that's warm, contextual, personalized, and relevant, then people are more likely to actually say, yeah, I'll actually accept this. And then after you're doing that third step of expanding your network, you just go on to content sharing. And the reason you do content sharing is to build yourself up as a thought leader in your field. You're building your personal brand and by default the brand of your company. And you're also creating demand for what products or services that you sell. And then the last step is just simply to actually reach out and ask for the meeting. That's what we call the lead generation. So that's what I'll do on LinkedIn. When I say I use Twitter for support, when I'm content sharing on LinkedIn, I also send a couple of tweets from the same piece of content. Of course, I change the wording a little because I don't want everything to look like I've just copied and pasted it.
Right.
And so that's how I use Twitter for support. And yeah, that's what I do on LinkedIn.
With LinkedIn, do you think that it's necessary to have the paid for account, or is it okay to just use the free account and you can accomplish as much?
Well, it's a really interesting time to ask that question because you know that Microsoft bought LinkedIn for $26 billion a few months ago. And we knew there was going to be a time when they were going to try to make the money back. And it looks like the time is kind of about now. So I would say up until now, it has been possible with a few limitations to do what you need to do on the free account. However, they're in test phase for the new design, and they've actually added a small handful of features, and they've stripped away a lot of features, and a couple of those features are really, really good. So what I'd say to you now is that when the new website is actually rolled out, I think you're going to have the paid membership. And of course, you'd have to decide whether or not to go to the LinkedIn premium account or go to the sales navigator account. So most people talk about those differently. They're all LinkedIn. It's just that they look very different to each other because they were built for different purposes. I'd say then, to answer your question quite simply, you can still get away with it now, but I don't think you'll get away with it for much longer.
Kind of like Facebook when they decided to start trying to monetize, then now, you really have to, as we say, pay to play.
Yeah, because I think from the stats I've seen, only about between 15 and 25% of the membership on LinkedIn is actually a paid membership.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Microsoft would like to change that balance. They want to make
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, of course. Of course. Now, when you were talking, you were saying, that you develop the relationship with someone and then you eventually ask for the interview,
For the meeting.
meeting with them.
Yeah.
How long would you say that it takes to properly develop that base in that relationship?
Well, I would say from start to finish, a program usually takes about 3 months. And this is what I mean. So it takes a couple of weeks to actually do the LinkedIn profile because you might draft it up, you might post it up, you might not be happy with it, you might make a few tweaks. At the same time, though, you can do the second step, which is actually searching for your prospects. But that takes a bit of time because you might do a search where like half the people are no good, which means that you haven't done a proper Boolean advanced search. Or you might do a search where you haven't got enough numbers. You haven't got enough people to actually connect with. So it takes a couple of weeks for that. Then there's the connection phase. And that's really hard to do because that's really laborious. There's no automatic way to do it. You have to personalize each invitation to connect. Mm-hmm. And let's face it, your wrist will only last so long. Not only that, and I've done this a couple of times in my life, I've sent more than 75 invitations to connect in one day. LinkedIn will make the assumption that you're an automated program and it'll ask you to enter a reCAPTCHA phrase, which really slows down the process. And by then your feels like dropping off anyway. Mm-hmm. So that takes a couple of weeks depending on how big a network you want. Then there's a content sharing phase. That takes the longest. And that's because these things don't happen overnight. Like you're not going to post one piece of content and then people think, wow, you're the greatest in this field. Because what happens is that only 20% of your content is seen. And the reason is because when you're posting a piece of content at any given time, most of the people you're connected to are either in meetings, on holidays, asleep, actually doing work at work, or something else. That's why it's important to repeat the content, like share new pieces of content. I share 3 pieces of content per week on LinkedIn. I suggest to everyone who's doing this that they do minimum 2 times. So let's say Tuesday, Thursday, because Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are the best days. But that needs to be done, I'd say, for about 7 weeks. Then you can actually reach out and ask for the meeting. Because when you ask for the meeting after sharing content for a few weeks, there's a sense of familiarity. So when you say to someone, say, hi Fred, we've been connected a little while, and by the way, there is a proper way to ask for the meeting, but you say, you probably know that this is what I do, and I'm aware that you and your company do this. I was wondering whether or not you'd like to put a face to the name and meet over a coffee or have a Zoom session or whatever the case may be. And you're not going to be a stranger to that person because that person would have seen some of your content. Not all, but they would have seen at least 20%. That's why it takes a few weeks to do the content sharing phase. But just to give you a rough figure, I would say around 3 months.
Wow. And you see, that's one of the things that I find, and of course for each platform it's different, but a lot of people think that with social media, no matter which platform, that, in a month's time, you're going to see all these great results. And it takes time to build that. And as I said, with each platform, it's a lot different in how much time it does take for that. Now, when you were talking about sharing content, do you recommend that, there's that 80-20 principle, but do you recommend that you share mainly content that's related to your industry, or just current events? What do you recommend as far as type of content to share on LinkedIn?
I would recommend anything that would actually help in your case if you actually go to meet someone. So for example, if you're an IT salesperson who is selling cybersecurity software to CIOs in whichever field, then of course, that sort of topic is easy, because I always recommend you share third-party content. Because if you're sharing third-party content, that means someone else, some other publisher, whether it be Forbes or the Financial Times, New York Times, whatever, has actually published the piece of content, and you provide an insight about it. You make the assumption that your audience is not going to have time to read the article, so you pluck out the key part of that article and you actually share it. But as long as it's on theme, it's okay. So if someone in cybersecurity, if he actually discussed something about cloud, that's okay because it's related. If you talked about something about firewalls, obviously it's related. If you talked about something that had to do with hardware, then unless that hardware is somehow related to cybersecurity, if it's part of the program or the system that he sells, that's okay. But if it's not, it's too much of a distraction, and therefore it tends to confuse people a little. So I'd say that as long as it's on theme, as long as it helps your case and that you can talk about it a little, if you meet this person over a coffee or face-to-face in a meeting, then that's fine.
I ask that because, looking at LinkedIn, a lot of times I see people posting, like quotes, or sometimes their picture of their food, different things. And I was curious because I know on Facebook they recommend that you do, share some things like, quotes, what's happening with your personal life, that sort of thing. So, and I think that with LinkedIn, a lot of people get confused about exactly what would they share on there. Now, with LinkedIn, I'm trying to remember, I'm embarrassed to say, I can't remember, on LinkedIn, the publisher part of it.
Yeah.
Do you use that, or do you just share things in the general feed?
Okay. Most of the time I actually share things in the home feed and the journal feed, and there's a reason for that. Published posts are great. I recommend everyone does one or some. It's just that the stats would indicate that published posts do best when they're between 800 and 1,200 words long.
Okay.
Now, most people aren't writers. Some people will actually sit at a laptop or a desktop and struggle to write that many words. Well, me too. And you've got to look at, the way I look at it is return on investment, and return on your time, let's say. So you could spend hours actually writing a published post, and because of LinkedIn's algorithm, and no one's party to it, so I don't know how they actually work things out. Some great articles that are really on topic will not be exposed as much as other articles which have no relevance to people.
Yeah.
So for best bang for your buck, this is what I say. Find third-party articles from reputable publishers that are on theme of what you actually sell. Then you actually put a few words around it in your own words, and it only has to be like 2 to 3 sentences, 15 words maximum. This is what I tell people, because people tend to write longer than they need to. Is they like get straight to the point and say it. So like, why is cybersecurity important? How is it relevant to this industry? You can mention your target market. You can call out CIOs in your editorial. An editorial is also called a status update. It's basically the insight that you're talking about on the journal feed that you mentioned before. Now, I actually allow an hour to do one. So if I'm doing 3 a week, I'm allowing 3 hours. I could tell you that in my case personally, it would take me more than 3 hours to do a published post, and that would be just one. And of course, like I said about the 20% rule, with 3 articles, that piece of content that you share per week, you've already gone up to 60%. With one published post, you're still at 20.
And that's good information because there for a while, a lot of people were thinking that they needed to publish. They needed to publish. And that was my problem, me thinking, okay, what am I going to write that's that long? Because I just don't, I'm not a good writer. I'm an economist. I tell everybody, I'll draw you a graph and illustrate it, but don't ask me to be able to write that long. And that's been one of the things, being an economist, it's so funny doing these interviews because I keep hearing in my brain opportunity cost. And it was a very difficult concept for my students to grasp. But everyone that I've talked to, they bring in, like what you said about, writing the one journal post or, doing the other. And you really need to stop and think about that. If you had a list of must-dos on LinkedIn, what would be on your top 3 must-dos for LinkedIn?
Okay, my 3 must-dos. First of all, it's the best practice profile. A lot of people have some sections of their profile looking really good and other sections they've missed out. Most people actually skip the summary or they put in a terrible summary. I would suggest that, like a lot of people say in their summary, I this, I that, and they just talk about themselves. But
Right.
it's got to be a reflection of how you are in real life. If you actually met someone at an event, you wouldn't go up to them saying, I this, I that. You'd talk about them. You talk about your industry. Your summary's got to be a little bit like that. So it's a bit of storytelling, like what's happening in your industry, what's happening in the field of B2B, how has that evolved, how you actually come into play with it now, and what are the pain points of your prospects. If you talk about your prospects, I mean, that's what your prospects want to read about. They'll actually want to read about themselves. So I would say complete the profile, everything from the proper headshot and the right headlines. Don't put in your job title in the headlines. Put in the proper keywords or a pitch a subtle pitch within your headline, and complete the rest of it with your skills and your experience. Put in rich media. You can put in videos and things like that. I know I did say before, LinkedIn are about to strip that out, but I think they might strip that out for the free accounts and they might leave it on the paid accounts. Otherwise, they are really crazy. So there's that. The second thing I'd say is that do share content and engage. Most people on LinkedIn who think they're sharing content are just liking this and liking that. Nothing wrong with that, but sometimes make a comment. Doesn't have to be War and Peace. As long as it's a short comment, it shows that you're talking about something. You could get a conversation going. And the other thing I would say is that be careful with who you connect with. For example, if you're looking to get meetings out of this, don't just connect with anyone. There's this, the saying about 6 degrees of separation. In theory, I should be able to get to the Queen of England from this side of the planet through 6 people only.
Mm-hmm.
And that's probably true. But even though it's important to build up your network, don't connect with everyone just for the sake of it. Try to connect with the people who I think that will actually get you to where you want to go. So it might be your prospects, it might be like the decision makers in the companies that you're after, or maybe the influencers definitely that you're after. So just don't think of one person and that's it, or think of the entire company. Try to make it a high quality network.
That's very good advice. And that was another question I was going to ask about, should you be concerned about numbers, how many people you're connected to, or should you be more concerned with having a good quality of people that you're connected to?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I wouldn't be too concerned about the numbers. There are people on LinkedIn who are connection junkies and whose goal is just the idea of having the most connections ever. And so you probably know this. LinkedIn have always had a rule about you should never have more than 30,000 connections. Now that is a lot of people. I'm nowhere near that. Believe it or not, there are people who are above that. And a few weeks ago, they started culling those people back to 30,000. So some of those people are really, really angry. LinkedIn have always had a set of rules. They have rarely enforced it, mm-hmm. but it's a totally different game from them now that Microsoft is on the scene and they're going to start enforcing things. Mm-hmm. So go for the quality, but what I would suggest too is that if you're not too sure, for example, you get someone who actually asks you to connect, you're not too sure, but they happen to have like 5,000 connections. Now remember, if you accept them, all of a sudden, those 5,000 people are part of your second degree network. when you go to share your content, you're going to get that much more exposure. So you can accept it. And nothing's a done deal too. If you regret it for some reason, you can always remove them as a connection. If they have for any reason, you can always report them or you can block them. So don't be too afraid. The ones that you need to be careful of, the people who are clearly looking to pitch something to you, who are all about SEO, and let's say in another part of the world, who you know are going to try to flog you something, then they're the ones to be careful of. But apart from that, I think that, yeah, a combination of quality and numbers is okay.
Yeah, and I think that, the ranking that, I sort of say Pinterest because I'm such a Pinterest person, that LinkedIn has, where do you rank among the people? I think that some people every day go on there to try to make sure they're in those top rankings, and I think sometimes people look at my profile just so I'll go to their profile and look at it, and they'll get credit for that. And
yeah, what they're trying to do sometimes is that they're actually trying to boost the views, exactly like you say.
mm-hmm.
You can actually remove that feature. I don't have that in my LinkedIn platform because I removed it because it's of no value to me. So basically, when I'm speaking to a client, I say to them, what do you want to achieve? And let's face it, most of them want to actually win clients to get more revenue. I say, well, that's the primary focus. And I know what the conversion rates are. So for example, if you ask someone to meet, they between 15 and 20% will actually say yes. And if you ask someone to connect and you use a proper invitation to connect, you'll get about a third connecting. So if you decided that at the end of 3 months, 4 months, whatever, I want to get 10 meetings. Well, if you want to get 10 meetings, based on the conversion rate for the meetings, you have to ask between 50 and 60 people for the meeting. Now, if you need to ask between 50 and 60, so let's make this simple and say it's 60, and a third convert, you needed to send out 180 invitations to connect. If you needed to send out 180, then you needed to find about 200 people in advanced search to ask, because by the time you actually go to send the invitation to connect, some of those people would already be gone, or they've left their job and they haven't updated their LinkedIn profiles. Sometimes people do that. So that's what you need to base it on. I do it really for the return on investment, because it's like any other type of marketing. You try to do something, you spend some money, and you hope to get a return on that, and that's what this is about.
Yeah, that's I found that to be true about talking about some people, they're left their job and so forth. When I was, looking for people as speakers for this summit, I was amazed at, some of them, they'd closed their business, or they were at a different job now, but yet their profile was still there, with the same job and everything. So, one other question, because we're getting close to the end of time here, that I wanted to ask you, because I know for me and for some of my colleagues, I think with LinkedIn, the most intimidating part when you're setting up your profile is knowing what to put where. Because, you have the description part and then the experience part and the summary. It's like, okay, well, what do I put in a summary, and then what do I put, so could you give some tips on that?
Sure. First of all, you can actually fiddle with the order. There's a default order. I think the first thing I'd have to say about that is that to have a proper headshot, well, some people don't, unless you're really in an artsy field, it doesn't have to be black and white. What I'd say is to people is that make it a headshot so that if you're actually meeting someone for the first time at the lobby of a huge building where there are tons of clients, and you spotted someone across the room, would you recognize them from the headshot? Because in some cases, that's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
With the headline, put in some keywords. So if you're an IT salesperson, you won't necessarily put in IT account manager or new business development manager. You might put in something like cybersecurity, SaaS, or you might actually put in software as a service or cloud services, or whatever the case may be. Because what happens is that if someone's going into LinkedIn and actually searching for you, they put in those keywords, you're more likely to come up higher in the ranking. The rest of that section is simple. With the summary, you've got a 2,000 character limit. That's about 5 paragraphs. You don't have to use a 2,000, but there's got to be something meaty there. They want to understand what you're about. So I'd say that tell a little story about what your field of experiences, like what's happening in the IT industry. We know that there's technological change. What are some of the pain points and challenges that your prospects are facing? That's a good thing to address because people will feel like you're speaking to them. And then talk a little bit about you and about the business that you're working for, your own business or the company that you're working for, and some contact details. Happy to meet with you. Here is how you can get a hold of me. Because that should be throughout the profile. So in case somebody finally thinks, yeah, I'll contact this person, it should be there. So by default, the next section is experience. Usually what I do is I move the skills section up. But with the skills section, you're allowed to list 50 skills. There's a lot of cynicism about that area because people say, well, I get endorsed for things that people don't know about me. And, it's like, why do they do that? And I get these hassled by this thing. Do you want to endorse this person for this? And I just want to get rid of it. So I click yes. But it's good for search engine optimization purposes. It helps you with your rankings. So as long as it's relevant, you don't have to put in 50. I'd say put in at least 20 to 30. That would actually suffice. With your experience section, do actually complete it. And this is the biggest advice I can give to someone. Try to get the recommendations. Recommendations are gold. And the strike rate's 1/4. So you usually have to ask 4 people before you get one because it's a real hassle to write. Even the people who love you. So
Yeah.
so do ask because that carries a lot of weight when someone doesn't know you and they're trying to know what you're like. I know that for a fact personally and through the clients I've worked with. And make sure that you're thorough with the rest of it and try to add in some things like infographics, or you might put in a case study if it's publicly okay to share, white papers, things like that. The important thing is to have a complete profile. The summary is very important. And try to add some rich media because half of people actually looked at LinkedIn on their devices. So they're going home on the train, they're bored as hell because their Kindle's gone dead. They'll look at their phone, they'll look at the profile. They might actually tap into some of that rich media because they don't want to read anything. It's too small, it's on the phone. So that's what I'd say about the profile.
Very good. Thank you. That's a lot of really good information because I know that at times when, a lot of people have talked about, I'm not real sure exactly what I'm supposed to put there. Like I said, we're drawing close to the end here, so I want to ask you, what would be the one takeaway that you would want people to take away from this today?
That if you're going to use social media to actually help your business, let's say it's to generate lead to get meetings, it's important to be consistent. It's not really the type of thing where you can think, I'm going to go full throttle this week and take it a little bit easy the following week. And it's got to be constant. So it doesn't mean that you have to dedicate your entire life to it. That's not what it's for. It means that you have to consistently put in a bit of time. So maybe can you set aside 15 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, because that'll get you much further than if you actually do 5 hours one week and like none the next. Mm-hmm. So just be consistent with it and keep on churning it through because it will actually bring results.
That's very good advice. And finally, I know later tonight that we will be posting the free gift that you're offering. So you want to tell them a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I mentioned before about sending a proper invitation to connect. A lot of people think, well, what do I put in? So what I did was I actually created a template that you could use as the basis for sending an invitation to connect to someone who's a second degree connection, someone who's a third degree connection, and also someone who is third degree, but they also happen to be in the same LinkedIn group that you are, because you might be a member of a LinkedIn group. And so what you're trying to do is have a sense of familiarity. So the template will be there. It's just on a one-page document, and you can just tailor it. And obviously it says like, hi, you insert the person's name, and then it's got the rest of the wording. And that'll help you to send a best practice invitation to connect instead of sending the default.
That's very good, because that's a lot of times if I just had something to go by, to know what do I put in there, it's really nice to have that. So everyone will want to take advantage of that. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you participating in this, and I hope that a lot of people take advantage of your offer.
Thank you very much, Anna. It's been an honor, and I hope I wish everyone success with their business, and I hope it goes well for them.